Hello everyone and welcome to Preparing for September Intake, How to Make Managing Users Simple. Thank you so much for joining us today, and first of all I'd just like to say a little bit about me. I'm the editor of Education Technology. My name is Sophie Beyer, and Education Technology is a market-leading magazine, print and online, for education technology in the UK. And here with me today I've got Stuart, Paul and Peter from CSE. And we're going to be talking all about auto provisioning, single sign-on, and making it all clear for you. So thanks very much for joining us again. And just to go into a little bit more detail, so we're winding down to the summer now, a lot of people, but if you're in IT, if you're in education, you know that you've got a new intake in September. And you know the challenges that you face when you're preparing for the new intake. Stuart, Peter and Paul are going to talk all about identity management, how it can benefit schools, keep your school and university networks secure, which is very important at the moment, as I'm sure you can appreciate, and how you can manage groups of different users. Then we're going to move on to single sign-on, improving the user experience, which is particularly a hot topic in HE, and also auto provisioning. We're going to discuss what it is and how it can streamline processes in schools, colleges, and HE. So just quickly about our experts here, all from CSE. Stuart Priestley is a technical director at CSE. Stuart is responsible for CSE's engineering, support and managed service departments. Peter, in the middle here, hello, has been a software development at CSE for 8 years, and he works on the web and application development. And Paul here on my right is Paul Oxford, is software development manager, and he is expert in identity management. So you've come to the right place. What we're going to do is I can take questions as we go along. We can stop and have a chat about your questions and have that discussion. And then we've also got a chance at the end to take your questions. So please keep your questions coming in. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Stuart.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So biggest problem in educational IT, in the summer holidays, you've got a bunch of new users arriving in September. It might be 50 if you're a small primary school, it might be thousands if you're a university. That's a lot of work. You've got a lot of users to get onto all the systems. In addition, in your summer holidays, you're likely to have perhaps build of your network systems, new systems added to the environment. And a lot of these systems nowadays are identity-driven systems. So I'll give you examples of them later on, but for such things as door access control, CCTV, library systems, etc. So one of the biggest problems in a school is they deal with teaching and learning. So there quite often isn't an overarching management of ICT that covers the whole school. So the problem with that is it leads to numerous systems that might be purchased by different people inside the school. So perhaps a librarian would choose the library system, a facilities manager would choose the door access control system, catering manager would choose the cashless catering system. And there's quite often little or no attention as to how those systems work together and how a student or a staff member will access each of those systems without having a card for one, a fingerprint for another, or a password for another, and a PIN. So that's quite a challenge for an ICT team. How do you get around it? Example on the screen there of all the different systems a school will have. Some of them, definitely. Some schools and universities will certainly have pretty much everything there. So what are the challenges to get around this? How do you get all these users onto all these systems? So you could essentially add them all manually. In a large university, that's just an impossible task. You've got thousands of users, multiple systems, it's just not even an option. So most systems have a way of automating user addition. The problem is they're all different. You might have CSV import from export from an MIS system. You might have some kind of automation, but on one system it'll be different to the automation on another. If you are in a CSV environment, each CSV might be different depending on the CSV that you import, and you also might get different CSVs depending on the system you export from. So it really is a minefield of different systems and different methods of automating. And even when you do get those users in, how do you then manage the changes in those systems? So midway through a year, a user may exit, a user may change schools or departments or groups, which means they may have different doors they can open with their swipe card, or you know, access times, or libraries, or anything like that. So what a school, a university, or a trust needs is a full identity management system, something that's aware of all the identity systems that are in the environment, automatically reacts to the addition of a user going into the MIS system, and use this MIS system to populate all these systems, create their accounts, create the passwords, set the security settings, and then notify the appropriate staff if it's a school, or email the end user if it's a university with the required information that they have to access those systems. Our system, Magellan, is one of those systems. It provides schools, colleges, universities with a cloud-based single sign-on portal. It provides full identity management, auto-provisioning of users to support anywhere, anytime learning. And it's part of what we'll be talking about today. The first aspect being identity management.
Thank you, Stuart. Hi, everyone. Right, so identity management. According to Wikipedia, this is their definition of identity management. This definition, and you'll probably see a lot when anybody talks about identity management, because it's what everyone picks from Wikipedia. At a basic level, identity management, it manages the identity's life cycle, and that involves defining what users can do in the network and within applications, and under what circumstances, and those are controlled by policies. So we go on. What is an identity? Okay, an identity in an IDM is used to establish an identity record with attributes, and those attributes are what describes that record. And in the identity world, they are often referred to as claims, so almost like a claim of what that identity is. And an identity typically defines things like the first name, last name, and display names, and they are the kind of standard attributes you'd see on any identity. But with all these applications and resources, those third-party attributes could be slightly different, and specifically for those third parties. So you have to have an identity system that copes with that and allows you to define those attributes so that those third-party applications recognize that identity. And the claims and policies are what shape that identity into kind of telling the systems what type of identity that is, whether it's a student or staff. And you can also have multiple identities. And to give you an example of that would be in a university, you might have a student identity, but also that student is a member of staff. So you'd have two identities, and you need a way of linking those multiple identities together. So when they're logged in as a student, they only get resources specifically for a student, and when they go into a staff, they get resources for a staff, but they still use that same identity, so the system knows how to work that out. You could also, another example would be in a university maybe, where you want a student to enroll or temporarily enroll into your campus by logging onto a website, enrolling, just getting a subset of resources so they can make a decision on whether they should enroll or not. And if they do, then you can then just turn that identity into a full identity, but from the end users, it's still the same experience. They're just now got extra resources available to them. So as I said, those are controlled by policies. Policies are different between identity management providers, but the most common ones, they control how the user authenticates, what password policies are applied to that user, where that user can log on from, what browser they're allowed to log into, what browser they're allowed to use, what devices, and multi-factor authentication options. They also can control passwordy type policies like password strength, password complexity, whether you have to use symbols and so forth. So we'll move on to multi-factor authentication. This is kind of the new kid on the block in schools. It's used by a lot of corporate organizations, but schools tend to shy away from it just because of the nature. It kind of gives another level of just, rather than just putting a password in, you might have to do several other steps. But the way to break down multi-factor authentication is into 3 stages. Knowledge, which is something that is known only to the user. So that would be like a password, passphrase, or a PIN. And then you've got possession, which is something held by the user, which could be a token, a smart card, or a mobile phone. Or you got inherence, which is something that's inherent to the user. So that'd be a fingerprint, retina scan, or voice. And they use that as a way of recognizing that only that user could specifically have those kinds of authentication factors to prove that they are who they say they are.
So those 3 multi-factors allow access then, so that the system knows who's using it, and that's how essentially it's managed.
Yeah, because if the system sends a PIN code to the user's mobile phone, in theory they should be the only person that has that mobile phone in their hand and owns that mobile phone. So it's a good way of saying it's the same as if it sends an email. They're the only person that has that email address, so they should be the only person to be able to access that, to give the code to then sign in. So yeah, it's a really good way. The policies drive it, so you can say if a user logs on from outside the network, then you want them to sign in with these 3 or these ways of multi-factor. So I want them to use a password. I want them to then have a PIN sent to their mobile phone, and I want them to verify that by email before I allow them in the system. If they sign on within your corporate network, you might want to do away with multi-factor because they're inside your network and you trust them a little bit more. I just want them to enter a password, that's fine. So you can use policies to control the level of access into your system.
And network security is becoming very important,
yes.
Particularly, I mean, in all networks, but in networks like AG, for example, there have been recent issues. So, I mean, this multi-factor authentication, could that help secure?
Definitely, yes. It's because if you use multi-factor authentication, if someone's is logged into your system, you've got more of an idea that they are who they say they are, rather than just maybe someone's left a password lying around, or even set a weak password, which is quite common. And multi-factor kind of eliminates that weakness. And it's not just for authentication, it might be for resetting a password, for resetting users' passwords as well. You can force them through a series of stages or challenges to make sure that they are the person resetting their password and someone's trying not to do it on their behalf with some brute force attack or something along those lines. So then how do we manage groups? In the identity world, groups are called roles, and they mean the same thing as groups in an Active Directory, in that you assign your users to your groups, and then you can assign groups to resources, to your applications, and to those applications, groups show up as a claim. So in the identity world, it shows up as a claim against that identity, and when it's passed to that third-party application, it looks at that claim and knows immediately what roles you're in. But it's the same way in Active Directory. It's just another way of assigning users to a broad range of resources. So that's groups. So what are the challenges with identity management? So one of the main challenges is dealing with these multiple accounts and with orphan accounts. And what we mean by that is that there's a lot of identity systems out there that doesn't handle multiple identities. It doesn't know what to do with them, doesn't know how to work them out. And it also, if you've got all of these identities associated with all of these other systems, what happens if one system is deleted, or say the students left school? How does that then translate into your identities? And that's where our system with reporting and auditing, you can look and see when a user last used the system and get reports saying, well, this user hasn't used the system in so long, and then you can start making decisions of what you do. And if you disable it, you can get hit through auto provision, which we'll talk about later, how that can then can translate throughout.
So you can really use this system to manage your users and identities, to know how many people you've got, where, essentially what their data is from there.
Yeah, you get a centralised view of your identities and control it from one point or one part of it, rather than having to go around and several systems, and you get a quite good auditing view of that. And then obviously managing all of the manual tasks with any identity provisioning, all of that. There's a load of manual tasks. What you have to do is just keeping all this user information in sync. We don't have to, and then you will end up in a complete nightmare at some point. But this is what a good identity management system will completely automate that all for you, so that so as far as from the end user's point of view, nothing's changed, but everything's happened in the background. Business process is not well defined. This is quite a big thing we found, is that because schools don't have an identity management system, they mostly have an Active Directory. They have their tools for creating those accounts in Active Directory, but there's no process of them, what happens with those accounts and what their life cycle is, and where those accounts should be and where they should be provisioned. So there's no real business process in place, and we help you that. We'll help you define that business process, work out what your needs are, and guide you through that.
And when you say business process, what do you mean by that?
Oh, it's basically what kind of identities you want.
Yeah.
What privilege should they be having? What resources should they have access to? How should I actually manage these identities? No one really, they don't know. It's like Active Directory. Once they create a user, it's kind of just left there, and then nothing happens with it. It doesn't get house kept or anything like that. So there's no process of what happens to an identity after it's created. So we'll help you do that and manage that whole identity's life cycle. So then the other thing with any kind of system is just getting your users on board. Nobody likes change, and so it's kind of the way that we built Magellan is we brand it to look and feel like your own brand. We take that from the website and such like. So when your users hit the ball, they just feel at home straight away. They feel like they're on something from the school rather than a third-party product that's out there. So we help you do that, and we do that from out the box.
And I'm quite interested in that, because schools are very embedded into their communities and they reflect their communities, and they've often got a lot of tradition and branding behind that as well. So that's interesting that at the front end. It's
one of the things that we found is that with any product that we've done, the branding was always one of the first complaints. Oh, we want to be able to brand it. So with Magellan, we just took it on board and said, you know, from the offset, we're going to brand it specifically for you, and that's how we deliver it to you, branded. And they get to pick if they don't like something to change it, but that's how we set it out. We brand it specifically for them. And the other thing is deploying loads of IDM technologies all in a short period of time. They think, oh, I've got an identity management system, and I've got to bring all of this in all at once. I've got to have Google, I've got to have Office 365, I've got to have my Active Directory, I've got to have it all in. And that's probably the wrong approach, and that's how a lot of identity systems work, is like if you don't have them all in at the offset, then later on it creates a mess because they can't integrate very well. With Magellan, you can pick a mix, and so you can bring bits on as and when you need them, which simplifies it for you. So if you want to just integrate your Active Directory, that's fine. If you don't want to bring Office 365 and later on down the road, you can just bring that in.
So say if you had a multi-academy trust, say, and one school's operating one system and another, then you could actually then add those systems together a bit later down the line,
Yes,
because
yeah.
obviously at the moment we've got lots of trusts joining together and they might be operating on.
Yeah, I think the thing with it, whatever a school use, because they quite a lot of schools join all of a sudden. A school might be using the Google Suite, and another school might be using Office 365. Because of the way Magellan works, you can essentially push the same port to them, but the different users will access the different tiles. And then, if they decide to merge those systems, they would just swap them over to the end user. It's seamless.
Yeah, which we've got on the last bit, which is obviously supporting multiple directory sources, where we support all of any on-premises domain, and that will be, doesn't matter if it's in a forest or a child domain, or if it's multiple domains, you can bring each one of them on at a time. So if you wanted to, you had multiple schools, maybe bring that one on, get them up and running, then bring the next one on, and so forth. And yeah, go do it that way. So this will take us on to single sign-on. And you might have seen this phrase bounced around the internet a bit, which is what do we mean by true single sign-on? So what is true single sign-on? A single sign-on is when you sign in once and then you seamlessly sign on to other applications or resources without having to put a username or password in. And the only way to achieve true single sign-on is through federated services. And the way that works is once you've signed on to your identity management system, that when you then access those resources, a token is sent to that resource rather than your password. So your password is never truly sent to those third-party resources, which means you can trust that third party because they never really have your password. So there's no damage that they could do. It's just a token. So you got to make sure that your identity provider has those abilities for that. So to give you some of those federated services, this is WS Trust, OpenID, OAuth, and XAML, or XAML2. They're your only federation service, but they have things like Office 365, Google Suite, I think My Homework and iSAMS all have those federated protocols, and that just means that you can sign into your identity provider and just click on a button to go to those resources, and you automatically sign straight in.
Okay, so I'm quite interested in this because I know, some schools you have Wi-Fi the whole
push the resources and the systems to those users on those devices, whatever operating system they are, and they can completely participate in all the schools' resources, systems, without actually then having the risk of those devices attaching or attacking the corporate network behind it.
Okay, so in a sense that's more secure as well, because you don't actually send a password. You say you're sending.
Yeah, you basically log onto the portal.
Yeah.
And obviously that's done all up in the cloud, and that then accesses. You're provided with the tiles to access the systems that you're approved to do, whether your device is on the network or not.
Yeah, hit stop sharing. So we'll get on to how Magellan actually resolves these problems. But there's also a lot of non-standard SSO protocols out there that people bounce around, which are forms and basic. And what you do by that, what we mean by that, is if you go to a website and you see the form that pops up with username and password, it means that you have to obviously manually enter that information in. So we get around that by providing a browser extension. and that effectively allows you to log into those resources seamlessly, and it works as if the users type that information in themselves. So
sorry, I think we're getting some technical issues there. We were just going to press. That's right. Sorry about this.
Good.
Okay, lovely. You should be back on. Sorry about that, folks. Sorry, interrupt.
So yeah, so there's a lot of like I said, non-standard SSO protocols. So we try to cater for all of them. So we provide browser extensions that allow you to log into web resources that don't support these protocols by, literally it's like being the user themselves, and it just signs into those resources. We also have a Magellan mobile app that will do it on mobiles as well. The end result for your users is their productivity is just massively improved, because they haven't got to remember usernames, they haven't got to remember passwords, and they haven't got to remember URLs.
So in terms of streamlining all those processes, it's just that much more simpler to log on, to get on with your work, and not students don't need to worry.
No, that's right.
Different
exactly. They haven't got, and we.
Or no excuses.
And from an IT manager's point of view, we have a library of SSOs that we just add to every single day. And if there's not one in our library, we add it for free. We won't charge to bring anybody's SSO into our software. We will just do it for free just to get it in our library. And the other thing that's quite important that we do is we have a shared credentials as well, which basically allows you to, for instance, say you've got a Facebook page that you want your users, but you want your users to update, but you don't want to give them the credentials to that Facebook account, because obviously the damage that could be caused by maybe a disgruntled employee or something. Then you can share that credential and create an SSO from that shared credential and assign that to your users, and they'll be able to access that Facebook with that credential, but they never see the credential. It's completely hidden away from them, which safeguards a load of things. So you can share things with just one shared credential, and then you can distribute that rights out to,
so
to
that
the
allows,
users.
yeah, you like sort of risk manage branding issues as well, just in case of any problems down the line, you can actually mitigate that risk.
Yeah, it also helps primary school users or users with a disability who might have problems with a normal standard username, password, multi-factor authentication. You can provide those credentials and the security with them without them having to log in the same way.
Oh, so it's more inclusive as well from that perspective.
And I guess how do we secure all this? Yes, we're trusting us with your passwords, trusting us with all this information. So the way we do it is we use hardware machines to encrypt your data, and then we store that encryption in our database. But the way that works is if our database got compromised and someone managed to get hold of the data, which they wouldn't, but if they did, they couldn't do anything with that encrypted data unless they then broke into Azure and stole the machine that encrypted it, because it could only be decrypted on the machine that encrypted it, and we don't even have access to that machine. So it's the highest level of encryption you can possibly have on any data is through a HSM. So we take it very seriously, so no data is passed over via unencrypted. It's always encrypted from start to finish.
Yeah, and big data is becoming really important, especially with HE. Yeah. When it comes to data management, what about GDPR?
Yes, GDPR, the General Protection Regulation, which, yes, that comes in May 2018 next year, and we, like a lot of companies, are working on it, and we will be compliant by the time it comes around. Yeah, it's quite an important one. Even if anyone doesn't know, leaving the EU doesn't change it. You've still got to meet it. You may have data protection agreements in place now. It's kind of a follow-on from them, but there's a lot more obligations that are required from both the data processor and controller. But to give some importance to how it is, last a year and a half ago when TalkTalk had their data breach, if GDPR was in place then, they wouldn't be about today because it would have bankrupted them with the fines that are imposed. So we take it seriously, and we'll be compliant with everyone else that should be compliant. And then you need to make sure that your SSOs are just easy to use. So like I said, we've had a library. We've been doing this for 10 years, so we've kind of ironed out all of the niggles and where the pitfalls were, and it is just as simply as dragging an SSO from our library, assign it to your users, and that's it. And they'll have access, single sign-on to that resource.
And I'm quite interested in this with regard to user experience, because people talk a lot, especially in HE, about how high expectations are from the students for user experience, and this, how does single sign-on benefit user experience?
Well, they don't have to remember the username, the URL or passwords. They've only just got to remember that one username and password to get into our system, and that's it. So they can just click on a tile and it takes them to that resource. So it streamlines. It means that things the lessons can get started quicker. There's none of this, I forgot my password or any of that anymore. So it makes their productivity so much better. So we'll now move on to auto provisioning.
Auto provisioning. What is auto provisioning? In the broad term, it is the automated creation, maintenance, deactivation, removal of objects from one system to another or multiple systems. A basic example of this would be when a user record is being created in an MAS system, an auto provisioning system would automatically detect that change and then create that user in the school's Active Directory based on a set of rules. This process basically provides that user with a working network login without requiring any input other than the original creation of the MAS record. It's important to note that while users are at the forefront of auto provisioning, auto provisioning systems shouldn't be limited to just user objects and should cover a lot wider range of objects, for example, groups and calendar objects. For things like timetables for students would be a good example. What are the technical challenges of auto provisioning? Well, auto provisioning isn't without its pitfalls. One of the biggest is getting it set up correctly, mapping out the logic, knowing how exactly you want those objects and users to be created and maintained in your systems.
So Peter, can I just ask a question there? I mean, in terms of setting this all out for a school or a university or a college, I mean, do you need to test this with the educational institution? Yeah, so you need to make sure that the data obviously is going into the system right and have a few test samples almost to users. I mean, initially you're going to have an original source of data, which is typically the MAS system. Yeah. And then you're going to have to manipulate that data to put it into all the other systems. So you need to, as you say, test all that process out. And this is where some of the challenges come, is knowing exactly how to work that logic effectively. Okay, and how long do you envisage it taking to set up auto provisioning from that, importing it from the MIS to actually being able to use it for everybody? Yeah. It's a difficult one to answer purely on the fact of it depends on how complex you're going to get with it. To do just a very simple system, you're probably taking an hour or two, but if you're talking about multi-site networks with multiple different levels of users and stuff like that, you could be a couple of days to a week maybe. So is it off the shelf, or do you provide a tailored bespoke solution? We offer a tailored bespoke solution. Every site's going to be different, and it's going to be difficult to have a rigid system that basically just tries to cover everybody. So we make it as flexible as we can effectively. And the logic can range from very simple systems to multi-site networks, as I said.
and you will typically have multiple different types of users which you need to set up. The easiest difference to notice there is staff and students. Staff will have different group memberships and require different permissions or licenses typically to students. You may also want to take it further and have multiple different types of staff users, maybe teaching or non-teaching, power staff users maybe. In that case, you need to know what variables and logic you're using to identify those types of staff users from the original, effectively, source of data you're getting it from, the MIS system.
Effectively, once it's set up, that's it. There's nothing more. You just let the system now just do this provisioning for you.
Okay, so I'm interested because you don't actually have to input the data. You actually can use an existing set of data, your own existing set. So that removes that one step. And then what sort of groups and characteristics can you assign to that? What can you do?
You can virtually do anything you want to. But the thing why it's kind of bespoke is because each site has their own way of how they want a group named. For instance, they might want to use different set from that source data to create that name. So it's just those variables that are what needs to be mapped for specific schools. The school can do it themselves. That we don't say that we have to do it for them, but we find it a lot easier if we help them along with it.
So say, for example, if you've got a year 9 student with dyslexia and they're in a particular learning group, I mean, what can it do? Can it map out the whole timetable? What's the potential?
It can do timetables, it can do calendars, it can create calendars in Office 365. It can even pick up if there's a student with a disability and assign it to a specific group. It uses the MIS data if you're pulling from MIS, so it can. And we're moving to a new system because of GDPR that allows you to, for the actual controller, to pick what data they want to share with us. So they have to give us consent to their MIS, and then they have to give kind of consent to what from their MIS we're allowed to access. So it gives them a little bit more control of what they're allowed to share with us. So whatever data is in their MIS, we can then make, with their knowledge, make decisions about how to create those objects in those destination systems.
And what sort of benefits in terms of streamlining and using staff time more efficiently can you be gained from auto provisioning?
Well, we provide managed services as well as an ICT support company, and I think anyone out there who's been in an IT system in a school will know that a huge amount of the time is spent with people coming in the door, can't change my password, or can't access the system, I'm not on this system, or a teacher coming in, I need access to this system, I need to access to this area of the school at this time. A huge amount of time is spent on our managed services just dealing with user management systems and password changes and things like that. And it's one of the things we use Magellan very well for. And it can save an awful lot of money in time and resource, especially in big universities with large IT teams, just removing that part of the job completely. It also gives these ICT guys the time to go out and help teachers in the classroom, which is really where you want them to be, not changing the password that a user's forgotten, which they now don't need to remember.
Okay, because I'm quite interested in that idea of sort of automation, and so you can actually use those resources more effectively to.
Absolutely, and that's really what an ICT, especially now with multi-academy trusts, where things are becoming more centralised. Your IT technicians are out in the schools. That you want them to be actually helping the teachers in the classroom. You want them to be there at the front of the class if they've got an important lesson or an Ofsted inspection. They can't turn the laptop on and have a problem and not have the help they need because you're dealing with a user on a system.
So now it'd just be the admin will add the new student into their MIS system. Our auto provisioning would kick in, create them an Active Directory account, assign them to the right groups, create a home directory, share their home directory, create an email. set them a license up in Office 365 ready for when they walk through the door. Everything's done for them. The IT man or the guy hasn't had to get involved in that process. So.
Yeah, it's also important to know it's not just about creation, it is about the maintaining of that user object and the deprovisioning of it afterwards. So things like a name change would, you want that to propagate across all your systems. You don't want your IT staff to have to change all of your services just because somebody's changed the name for whatever reason.
Oh yeah, so if you disable, I mean, if you don't have some kind of provision in place, if you disable a user in one system, it doesn't necessarily disable it everywhere else. So they might not be able to get into your network, but they could probably still log into Office 365 with provision. You disable it at the source, it just propagates through and disables it in those other systems.
Which keeps networks more secure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So moving on, how does Magellan handle auto-provisioning? Well, Magellan is a very flexible auto-provisioning system, and to accommodate all types of network configurations, it uses basically multiple source and destinations. Once these set up, it then uses background workers to process that data securely in the cloud. This multiple source and destinations can work well when it comes to multi-site environments, allowing multiple MIS systems to feed in user creation and management to, for example, a central Active Directory or Forest. So it's useful for when you work with things like multi-academy trusts, which may have multiple MIS systems across their multiple academies. Every site is going to be different though. Hence why we have to have this multiple source and multiple destination kind of setup so it can be as flexible as it can. When it comes to the setup, CNC engineers will work closely with each site to make sure auto-provisioning is bespoke to their needs.
Okay, so in terms of, I mean, as you know, there's loads of schools, academies now going into multi-academy trust. So it's not, can you bring a pupil from, say, a primary school within that trust, and you know, could you actually take them up to secondary without having to input all their details again? Because so many primary schools are they do then feed in.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole idea around it really, is that, I mean, once a school joins a trust, that's one of the more difficult stages because it happens straight away, and then straight away the finance team need access to the data in this school. But quite often your finance person is pre-existing in the trust. So what Magellan can do is provide access to those resources in the other school without actually joining those domains, without actually doing all that trust and security management at the domain level, just for a start, because those two networks might be geographically hundreds of miles apart.
Yeah.
And so that's how we do it. We do that in the cloud, and basically resources can be assigned to anybody, whoever they are, in whatever school they are, whether they're connected or not.
Okay, well, thank you very much to Stuart, to Peter and to Paul. And what we've got now is got an opportunity to take some questions, and we've had a couple in already. So first of all, we've got something in from a school ICT manager who asks, what type of statistics are you able to provide?
We use Azure Insights to gather our stats, and we can provide statistics from what users have logged on, where geographically have logged on from, what types of browsers they're using, what operating systems. So we can pull stats for pretty much anything the customer requires. So yeah, it's limitless the types of what parts of Magellan they're using, what applications that they clicked on. So yeah, those basic stats that you'd expect from an identity system we provide.
Okay.
The important part of that obviously is a school, university will pay for these bits of software. So really it's good information for them to know how many people are actually using them, especially if they're, you know, research, resource based. You know, if you're paying for digital content and no one's accessing it, you know you can do without it next year.
So you really have an evidence base for future decision making.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which is so important, obviously, in
Yeah.
the current climate. Okay, so we've got something from an ICT manager from an academy in the West Midlands. So they're interested, just a quick run through in what is available with Magellan. So we've done some of them, but could you just quickly run through what else Magellan?
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of three main aspects to it. You know, single sign-on portal. We've kind of covered. It originally grew out of a need for remote access. So it'll ask for. It gives you access to your home directory, shared areas, internal systems as well, so internal websites. So without having to do complicated NAT rules or external access, Magellan will pull all these internal web-based applications out. It also provides links to things like web-based Windows applications and things like that, really. Just access to lots of resources, and also the other aspect, which I did briefly cover, is the BYOD aspect. It's a portal that users on their own device can use without schools and universities having those devices that you can't manage attached directly to their network and potentially compromise them either on purpose or accidentally with out-of-date antivirus or Windows updates, etc.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now I've got a few questions here, and looking at these, we've got something about home access. So is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. The Magellan works in the cloud. So essentially, from the end user's perspective, it doesn't matter whether you're in the school, in the university, at home, on the beach. You go to one website, you log in, and then you access all the resources that you're allowed. And bearing in mind, taking Paul's point from earlier, you may want to assign different rules as to where geographically you're logging in. So if you're inside the school, you might want to access. You can also do controls on whether you want users to be able to download work from shared areas when you're outside the system, and equally upload. But that's different for different universities, depending on what your requirements are.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question just in: how much after-sales support is available? Tech support such as school visits.
Well, generally we will install on site anyway. We'll prepare it from the cloud, so the school go through that process with us, or the university, get it branded right, and basically you get a list of resources that you want to apply to people. So that might be an MIS system, a VLE, a library system, cashless catering system. Any of these are all pre-prepared in a statement of works, so that the school know what they want and they get it when they log in. So that goes down to the detail of yes, staff members will have access to the finance system, but students will have access to the library system, that kind of thing.
And yeah, and there's not really much of a site visit from a technical point of view, because everything sits in the cloud. The whole thing runs on an Azure infrastructure. There's the only thing that we need to have installed on a customer's site with just a little connector that sits on any server. There's no real resource. That's not resource hungry, and that just allows the Magellan to talk to their Active Directory. But they don't. If they don't want the Active Directory, they don't have to have that connector. But part of that we offer built into Magellan is WebDAV. So we have WebDAV file access to your network resources as well via that connector.
And obviously, from an end user perspective, we're quite happy, and we do it quite regularly, to come in on teacher training days and just do half an hour presentation, so that the users familiarise themselves with how to access it and what they can see when they get there. We can do that. We've done it with staff on teacher training days, and we've done it with students as well. Completely depends on how the school works really and what they want to do. We've also done it with ICT leaders, so evening sessions, train the trainer. It kind of depends on the professional development routine that the school or university has.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question from John. Can you expand on the mobile app you mentioned, please?
Yeah, we've got a new version coming out soon that we've just rewritten from the ground up, and that will give you its new user interface, gives you access to your tiles, so you can single sign on from that. It gives you file access to your network resources. It allows you to open those files in the apps on that device, and we'll single sign you into those apps. So yeah, it's been brought online with the web browser side of Magellan, which before it didn't, it just done file access. But yeah, no, it's come a long way.
I think one of the things that one of the things that I use it for, from a work perspective, is Magellan has the ability to attach to a terminal server farm. So what you can actually do is access your, I do it on my iPhone, is access a Word document, edit it and save it back. And Magellan gives me the opportunity to download the file, open it in whatever app I've got, and then when I finish with it, I can just open it in Magellan and I'll shove it back up into my home directory. And that's a really easy way to work with files.
Or Sims, currently staff can access Sims on their iPad through remote apps within Magellan or through a browser. So it's got quite a few little features.
Okay. All right, thank you. And we've got another question. So is it a technical role to manage identities in a school, or could this be completed by a member of the admin team? Does it have to be an admin manager task?
No.
That's from Gary.
No. Well, with our system, definitely no. No, it's been tailored and simplified so that anybody can do this. And we would help them anyway. We'd help them along on that line. So we don't do anything and walk away.
Yeah.
We're kind of invested
So
the way through.
you said you also manage, you do also provide IT support. So does the IT support run to actually inputting the information, or what's that?
Well, yeah, certainly in the beginning there'll be an agreed statement of works where we want to get to with Magellan, what systems need to authenticate with others, what auto provisioning, what tiles for which groups. That's part of the original scope of works. Onwards from
Gotten Apple iPad passwords and Apple IDs.
I don't know what Apple. No, it hasn't got MDM capabilities built into it as yet. It's an interesting question. I guess we could do in our mobile app. So it would be, if it was something of interest, we would, and it was something that was required by a number of people, then we would add it. But we don't offer MDM capabilities from Magellan, so we don't distribute apps to mobile phones or anything like that.
Yeah, and I guess if you've got a classroom full of Apple iPads, you won't need the ID because any apps will be already pre-downloaded onto that.
No, I think as if they're saying is if a kid's forgotten the ID, they can't then get back into it.
Yeah, that's something.
Yeah, but no, we don't go down. So it's an interesting idea, something we would consider if we was requested to do it.
Okay, then getting to the real nitty gritty here, what is the cost of Magellan software?
Cost is £2.50 per user per year, but it really does depend on. Obviously, if you buy it for more than a year, there are deals to be had, so feel free to get in touch.
Okay, thank you. And is there support in Ireland?
The support anywhere, really. It's a cloud-based system. If people want to use it anywhere in the world, they are very welcome to.
Okay, so I actually had a question. I'm interested in the amount of students, people are preparing for an education in September. Presumably it's a huge number.
Well, in schools, there's around 8.5 million students. So if you take entry to a primary system and entry to a secondary system, you're looking at around 1.5 million accounts would have to be created in September. And that's just to log on to the Active Directory. That doesn't count all these other systems that we're talking about, your access control, your virtual learning environment, your room booking system, your help desk, website, etc. So it's a huge amount of accounts creating, and that exponentially will grow year on year, I'm sure, as every other system, as more and more of these systems arrive.
Okay, thank you. And there's a report out this week on squeeze on school budgets, and obviously that's been dominating the headlines over the past 6 months and beyond that. What's the potential for cost savings here?
Well, it's huge, as I said earlier on. I think there's a lot of time taken in universities and schools in user management issues. They may be simple, but it's still time taken. It's still a call logged. It's still a journey out to a classroom. There's a huge amount of resource saving, and the senior management can either take that in cost saving without needing to pay the resource, or they could reroute that resource, like I said earlier on, into the classroom and use that resource more to the benefit of teaching and learning.
Also, there's a number of tools that schools are already buying in, probably cost them thousands of pounds just to do all these different elements, because one tool doesn't do everything, which they could pretty much replace those tools by just sticking Magellan in and save money on having to spend on those tools. So yeah, we're pretty much good at replacing those tools. That's what we aim to. We look at those tools, see what they can do, and we try to mimic just to make sure that we're ahead.
Okay. In terms of all those tools, you said, just picking up on that, we've got so many tools out there for schools, haven't we, and educational institutions. So say if some school is running on one system and one's on G Suite, for example, how does Magellan, how does it help there?
Well, essentially, it's just G Suite would be one tile, Office 365 would be another. If you were having a portal inside a trust, for example. So really, you can have a multitude of systems from a multitude of geographical locations. That's the thing with education. It's slightly behind the corporate world in its migration to the cloud, and it's not really going in one big lump where people are picking up the server rooms and putting them in the cloud as the kind of some do in the corporate world. They're taking bits out. So the MIS system might go into the cloud, virtual learning environment. It's a hybrid setup. And once you've gone to a hybrid setup, it's very difficult then to get the addresses where you go to access those resources out to an 11-year-old kid who might not be that bothered about where they are really once they sit down in their lesson. So this is all about giving them access to the resources right in front of the face. And one tile might be in the room behind the classroom, and one tile might be in the cloud.
And giving them the same experience no matter where they are and what device they're on.
Okay, thank you. And I just wondered if you could talk about a single sign-on example, so a school or an institution that would help with single sign-on and what benefits.
Yeah, well, there's quite a few of them really. The first default thing that school asks us is MIS to Active Directory. So that an admin person creates that account, and then that account appears in Active Directory.
That's not single sign-on.
However, but yeah, once that account's on, they sign in, and then basically from the tiles, be straight into their VLA, straight into the room booking system. We've done this with a number of schools. A school down in London who wanted us to create single sign-ons for their virtual learning environment, and Office 365 as well. So basically, once they're in, it's just they click on Office 365, or Mail, or SharePoint, or Tasks, You can either have the whole dashboard or pinpoint it to mail or an individual part of Office 365 or G Suite.
That's also not just tailored to students and staff. You can also use this for parents. You can give parents a portal and give them single sign-on to those resources without having to worry about distribution passwords out to parents.
So that's a whole nother user group there.
Yeah, exactly.
Use. Okay, thank you. So we've talked about streamlining the systems and managing those resources more effectively. I mean, what does that then give the institution sort of the potential to do with those resources?
Well, the options are limitless, really. I mean, it allows them to investigate different systems, provide different systems for different users who have different needs, but equally give the same interface to them all, so they all understand what they're getting and where they need to access it.
It's completely platform independent, isn't it?
Yeah.
It works on all platforms, any OS,
Thank you.
any device.
So, in terms of Magellan, can you just run through the sort of the key benefits, and what if people want to find out more, where can they go? What's the next step?
Okay, I mean, the absolute key benefit is the cost saving, because of the saving time and the saving resource. Increased security, increased adaptability, where we're providing that BYOD experience so users can use their own device, which they're obviously more comfortable on, without impacting the security of the system. Better collaboration between users, staff and students, between different schools, between different universities, between anyone essentially. And if people want to know more about it, visit our website, cse-net.co.uk. We can provide them with a free demo.
Okay. Right. I'd just like to say thank you very much to Stuart, to Peter and to Paul.
Thank you.
And thanks to people who have joined us. And this webinar is available to view, obviously, so if you want to share it, please do. And very nice to see you all.